Hello, my name is Eric William Wellstrand. Welcome to Section 1 of Introduction to the Economy of Saudi Arabia and the Other GCC Countries. The section you're about to listen to is called Introduction to the Region. I will start this section as I start every section. If you are listening to them individually, the one I would like you to listen to first is Section 0. There I'll explain the purpose, outline, and disclaimer for this presentation. The GCC. Actually, the full name is Cooperation Council for the Arab States of the Gulf, but is more commonly known as the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC. Have a look at the map. You see that the by far biggest country is Saudi Arabia, where I am currently living. If you move along the Gulf coast, we'll see in the right-hand corner you have Kuwait. Further down you have the small island state of Bahrain, followed by Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman. So basically we have the whole Gulf Peninsula, excluding Yemen. There is also some debate about Jordan and Morocco joining, but as of today, that are the countries who are in. These countries are quite similar economically and cultural. From a pure economic perspective, they are closer and maybe better suited for a union than, for instance, the EU. What do they have in common? First and foremost, oil and gas is the backbone of most of these countries' economy. Most famously known, of course, as exports, but also as cheap feedstock for industry and local consumers. If you look at the bullet points on the right-hand side, I will go through these ones explaining areas of where the GCC would like to cooperate and where they are cooperating. I'll start at the top. They have talked about having a single currency for years. Actually, this is not such a big step, since everybody except Kuwait is basically pegged to the US dollar. Kuwait is pegged to a basket of currencies where the US dollar is the biggest. One might ask, why are these countries pegged to the dollar? The reason is they receive most of their income, or at least their export revenues, in dollars. Oil and gas is sold in US dollars. Therefore, it makes sense for them to be pegged to the dollar. When it came to creating a single GCC currency, early in the process, they had a problem deciding where to put the central bank. Saudi Arabia wanted it, and the United Arab wanted it. This went a little back and forth. Long story short, the Emirates and Oman have pulled out, leaving Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar left. Since this time, it has been postponed several times. It's interesting to note, when you read the papers, or any other news here in the region, they're always talking about the GCC currency as something that's going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when. Personally, I don't really dare to say when because it has been postponed so many times, but at least they're still planning on it, and I believe it will happen. When? We'll have to wait and see. Customs unions. A little bit of the same thing. They're all in it together, nobody's pulled out. They have talked about it since 2003. It's been postponed several times. Based on what I see today, I would say at 2012 at the earliest. It might be postponed again. There they're arguing about the distribution of import duty revenue. Tax, they wish to try to harmonize the tax code in the GCC. I want to clear out one misconception. Very often you will hear that there is no tax in the GCC. It's very common among expats to say this. This is partially true. I'll use Saudi Arabia as an example. Income tax in Saudi, for both Saudi nationals and expatriates, were abolished in 1975. They do, however, have what they call a zakat. Zakat is a wealth tax levied on Saudi and GCC nationals, also on Saudi businesses, or fully owned Saudi entities, and Saudi and GCC shareholders in limited liability companies. The rate is approximately 2.5% of an individual's net worth or an entity's asset, less specified deductions. This is a religious tax dating back to Muhammad. Saudi corporate taxes based on income range from 25% to 45%. Now, companies with a joint venture structure having at least 25% Saudi ownership are often exempt from income tax for a period of 10 years. Why? This is part of the Saudi diversification incentives. They want to attract foreign investors to set up factories and so on, which I will return to in later sections. There is no VAT in the GCC. They're also here been talking about introducing it. They want to introduce one VAT for all the countries, but as basically everything else, it has been delayed. Transport is an area they're trying to coordinate, particularly in railroads. There are or several other countries are building quite extensive railroad systems right now, and they're trying to, of course, harmonize them and tie them together. I will get back to this later as well. In power production or electricity transport, is what it is, high voltage cables, they are starting to set up a GCC network. There are several countries who already have connections. For instance, they recently opened a high voltage cable between Oman and the Emirates. That was in September 2011. If you see many years in the future, we can see this developing into a power market, as we all see in, for instance, the Nordic countries. We have something called Nord Pool, which is basically all the Nordic countries that where electricity is exchanged. We have similar in the EEX, which is around Germany and neighboring countries, and also in the US. But since there's no deregulated energy business or no deregulated power market in any of the individual countries as of today, this will take years. The labor system is also very much the same, or the labor division in these countries. They have one major thing combining them, is that they have large populations of expats or expatriates. And I'll use Saudi as an example. I'll do this in my whole presentation. Saudi has 22 million citizens, and they have roughly 8 to 9 million expats living here in Saudi working. These 8 million are predominantly men in working age. And the 22 million, of course, includes young and includes all elderly. What I'm getting at is that 9 million men in their working age in a society where many women don't work, that is a big chunk of the workforce. In the private sector, in fact, almost 80 to 90% of the jobs are done by, or work is done by expatriates. In the public sector, it's the other way around. Public sector jobs are basically exclusively for Saudis. And Saudi is not the most extreme country. The Emirates has 8 million citizens, 50% of whom are Indians, and less than 20% are locals. There are different numbers for the other. I'm not going to go through each country, but they're in this ballpark. Basically, they allow a lot of people to come to their country, work. They do not give them citizenship, as we often do in America or in Europe. I'm talking they will never get it, as in their kids can be here, they can be born here. They will never get citizenship. Using a stereotype, we can say there's developed a culture where the expatriates come in, do most of the work, and the locals live off the what I call rent money of the oil. This is, of course, a stereotype. It doesn't cover every individual, it doesn't cover every company, every sector, and it is something that the governments are trying to change. Back to the GCC as a union. I personally believe that the current GCC is actually one of the best examples in the world for countries that should enter into a union. I'm saying this because they are so identical economically. They are also they have much the same political systems. I will compare this to I'm talking about letting in Jordan and Morocco. I understand that politically there's often an interest to increase a union like this, especially now post Arab Spring. Again, this is an economical introduction. I'm not going to cover many political issues. What we can say from the European experience is that letting, for instance, Greece into the EU is currently, maybe in the future will change, but right now that doesn't look like the best decision. And I feel the same way of letting other non-oil producing poorer countries into the GCC.